Welcome, everyone. I'm Sam Liccardo, and we're here for a discussion about parenting during a pandemic. And I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Damon Korb, someone I've known for many, many years who happens to be an expert in this subject of parenting, something about which I am certainly not an expert. And of course, I'm wearing glasses both so I can read and because whenever I'm around any classmate of mine who's a lot smarter than I ever was, I have to wear these glasses to look a lot smarter. So I'm grateful that Dr. Damon Korb is with us. Welcome, Doctor. Good to have you.
Thanks for the flattering comments. Some of them were true.
Yes, well, many, in fact, all. So let me tell you, our audience, a little bit about Dr. Korb. Damon is the author of Raising an Organized Child. He is a pediatrician, specifically a developmental and behavioral pediatrician, and he's based out of Los Gatos, and he's served for a couple decades now, and the founder of the Center for Developing Minds. That is a specialty clinic in Silicon Valley that is devoted to developmental and behavioral pediatrics. And he focuses on a whole host of issues involving children, young adults, from behavior issues, learning difficulties, attention problems, social skill deficits, autism, spectrum disorders, developmental delays, psychological disorders. And he has had really a pivotal role in the establishment of 3 separate clinics in Santa Clara County that serve children with developmental variation. So clearly he has seen a wide array of challenges in all of our families. By the way, Raising an Organized Child is a best-selling book available on Amazon, I presume.
Anywhere you look.
Okay, fantastic. And a go-to guide on thinking organized or executive function. He also happens to be the father of 5 children, something you have in common with my father as well. That just is a testament to the incredible patience of your wife and my mother. But nonetheless,
I've met your father, and somehow he looks great all the time. So that's something to aspire to.
Yeah, that's right. That had to do with the hard work of my mom, I know. So in any event, Damon, it's great to have you with us. And I know, although there is a social distancing order in place for all of us, an awful lot of our families are pretty cooped up. In fact, we've got, I know, an awful lot of my friends who are pulling their hair out right now because kids are at home. And we, of course, love our children. We love our families, but we also know this can be a really challenging phenomenon for an awful lot of parents who are also trying to work, or maybe they're not getting a paycheck right now. And it's a very stressful time because they're having a hard time making ends meet. We know there's a lot of stress and anxiety. Let's start with what we've got with the shelter place in order. So many of our everyday activities have been put on pause. And let's talk about the safety of the order itself and what safety means in the context of a family that is really cooped up in many ways. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
So I think the first thing to talk about is just we need to make sure everyone's safe. And so that's why we have a shelter in place. This is a very contagious virus that hops from person to person. But the way viruses work is if they have no one to hop to, they don't die because they're not alive, but they degrade and they fall apart. And there's nowhere left for them to go. And so that's how we beat this thing, is we all stay apart, we all stay separate, and we'll get through this. But once we've practiced these safe things, we've sanitized and we've separated from others, then we have to deal with the reality that we're going to be cooped up in our house for a month, 2 months, uncertain amount of time at this point. And we need to learn to work together with each other. And we need to learn how to help our children feel at ease. And the way that we do that is it's all about how we communicate with our kids. It's how we set up what the structure is going to be in our house, and also what we say to them and what we allow them to hear. You know, a lot of kids right now are hearing things on the radio and the TV because it's on constantly, and there's scary news out there. We're hearing about death rates that are going up. And it's really important for parents to be conscious about what they have on in the background, because your kids, even if they're as young as 4 years old, they hear it, they pick up on it. And what you really want is you want your child to be able to hear from you first. You want to be able to tell them the truth so that they're not picking up rumors and scary stories from other people.
And Damon, you know, a few years ago, there was a video that was broadcast by BBC that went viral, as I understand. I remember seeing this a couple of years ago. And now that family is back to give us an update about family dynamics at home during a pandemic. So
That's
let's
funny.
watch that video for a moment. We'll be right back with you. I think I watched this video 4 times myself. I think every parent has experienced those moments too well.
Right. What's great about that video is that I'm sure they told their kids, we are going to be televising live and I need you to be on your best behavior, right? And I need you to sit there, and the child just can't contain herself. She's too excited about the opportunity to be on camera.
I guess international audience means nothing to a 4 or 5-year-old.
No, it really doesn't.
And I guess, I know you're at home right now. The youngest of your 5 children is now 14, so you're past that state. But whether we think about young children or older children, you know, we know that there are safety issues, certainly with families being at home, involving everything from medication, access to weapons, things like that that people may have in their homes. Do you want to talk a little bit about the safety issues?
So just, you know, in terms of, there's 2 types of safety. We have to be safe from the virus, but we also are cooped up and we're dealing with something we've never had to deal with. And for families where domestic abuse or high levels of stress have been problems, we're more at risk, or they're more at risk at this point. And so they need to be conscious, because nobody wants to hurt their loved one. And so whether it's locking up your guns and ammunition to make sure that people aren't having immediate access to that, or for your kids that may be depressed or anxious or totally stressed out, keeping medicines locked up and safe is real important during times of stress.
Yeah, great points. And I should note, for those of you who are watching, if you happen to live in San Jose, we actually have a law, as do many other cities, that all guns must be locked up in a safe home. And we hope that everybody is abiding by that. So important for our children. You know, this is, as we think about safety and risk, parents are having to talk to their children about COVID-19. And they're hearing, as you mentioned, a lot of scary news out there. How do you approach that issue about how parents, when they're talking particularly to young children about COVID and the threat that it poses? At the same time, we know an important role for parents is to ensure that children feel safe.
So the first thing I think that it's important to do is to hear what they have to say. Listen, what have you heard? Find out about what they say, even if they're 4, 5, 6 years old. Because what you want to do is you want to dispel any myths, things that they've heard that aren't true, because those things can grow in their minds and get bigger and bigger and become scarier and scarier for little kids who fantasize and imagine a lot. So listen to what they have to say, and then answer their questions, because kids want to know. And when you answer the questions, you just give them straight answers, and you don't have to give them all the detail, because death counts and numbers are less meaningful to a 4 and a 5 and a 6-year-old. But it is safe to say that this is a virus that is very contagious, that people can spread it to each other, and that if somebody gets a really bad case of it, they could die. But then what you do is you say, but here's what we're doing to be under control. One is the doctors are looking for vaccinations right now, and they're treating people 2 is we are going to wash our hands every time we do this, that, and that. And when we wash our hands, we're going to wash our hands for 20 seconds. 3, we're going to stay away from people, even grandma. We're not going to go see her during this to, 1, keep us safe, but also to keep her safe. So you tell them what they can actually do so they feel a sense of control.
And I imagine that how much you tell them obviously would depend on the age of the child. At what age do you think it's appropriate to actually talk about the risk of death?
So kids around the age of 8 and 9 get really interested in death because they've developmentally matured enough to recognize that the world goes beyond just them. Their egocentrism starts to disappear around 7, 8, 9 years old. So they're going to ask a lot of questions about death. And it's okay to answer those questions and be honest and factual about that information with an 8-year-old.
You know, certainly parents themselves are grappling with challenges with their own mental health. You know, I remember reading it just a few days ago that Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, of course, have been canceled, so people no longer have the ability to have the social support.
They still are offering virtual ones, though. They still can get virtual Alcoholic Anonymous meetings and those Narcotics Anonymous. That's important.
And what are the best ways for parents to be looking for those resources online or by phone? Or do you have any ideas?
So that's outside of my expertise.
Okay,
but I'm sure if we go to the Alcoholics Anonymous websites, they have which ones are offering virtual classes right now.
Okay, see, I shouldn't have done that. I know that you're obviously a pediatrician, so I'll focus on the subject. So obviously there's a challenge with parents, as you just saw in the video, and as you know so well, you're doing work at home, and there have to be limits and boundaries, and kids necessarily want to get engaged sometimes, and sometimes they want to run around. And how do you establish limits and boundaries in a way that is both realistic, because you just got to get some stuff done, and also at the same time is respectful of the parental relationship of the child and the need of the child for attention?
So when your child heard that they were going to be home from school for a couple of weeks, they said, "Woohoo, it's a vacation." And you're like, "Oh my gosh, how am I going to get work done? Or how am I going to, how are we going to prepare meals and make everything happen?" So you both have a totally different frame of reference, the parent and the child. And it's really important for parents to set that structure. What kids do without structure is they test your limits as much as possible, and they'll push as far as you can. It's kind of like, use the analogy of riding a roller coaster. When you get in the roller coaster, the first thing you do is you pull that safety bar down. And the next thing you do is you shake it, right? Because you want to test that it's going to be there when you need it. And that's what kids are going to do. They're going to test you. And depending on how loose that safety bar is or how much freedom you give the kids, they're going to test more and more and more. So setting really clear limits and what those expectations are. And really, what I'm asking parents to do is to do the same thing that they always do. We have bedtimes, we have wake up times. Now it's real easy to have regular meal times because everybody's home. Those are structure and limits that are important. We have rules about electronics. And even though you might be a little more lax about your rules on electronics during this time, because, and the reason why I would be lax is when it gives more social opportunity to these kids, especially the older kids, the teenagers who really need to be social, then I'm okay using it that way. If we're just sitting there and gaming all day, that's not okay. But if we're doing it to be social, you can lax your rules. But have those rules and those limits and the boundaries. We don't use our electronics after 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever the rule is in your family. Let them know that those limits are still in place. Limits and boundaries reduces anxiety in the long run.
Yeah, I love that image that you offered of being in the roller coaster and testing the safety bar. I mean, we've all had that experience, whether as children or as parents. And really, by the way, let me interrupt this for a moment. I know if folks are joining us on Facebook, and if they have particular questions or comments or suggestions, feel free to jump in and type them up. And we've got a moderator who will send them to us if we can get to them in time. We'd love to hear all your good questions about challenges you may be having at home and how Dr. Korb may be able to help advise you. There is a new sense of normal that has to be created with all of this. You still need, as you mentioned, routines and limits. How do families create that new sense of normal?
So I think routines are very important. In a child's life, they get up, they have their breakfast, they go to school, they have a recess, they have more classes, they have a lunch, they come home, they do homework, they have dinner together or do an after-school activity. But it's a very routine life that most of us live. And so it's important to continue thinking about that routines need to be in place. Now, your routines can shift, and the time of day when you do things can have a little more flexibility, but it's important to have exercise built into your day. It's important for especially the younger kids, but it's important to have creativity and opportunity to just have free time. It's important to have some cognitive activities and some learning activities and meal times and everything built into your day, so you can create your own schedule that works well for your family and set up those routines. And those routines become increasingly important for young kids. And as they get older, you want to give a little more flexibility within those routines or put the kids more in charge. So for a young child, you might start off with a really clear routine, but maybe for a 10, 11, 12-year-old, you might start saying, hey, we're going to do some cognitive activities. Let's make a list of all the possible cognitive activities, and you can pick one each day so that they have flexibility built into that routine. For the older kids, for the teenagers, I like to talk about setting goals so that you can say, hey, what would you like to accomplish? We're going to be home for a couple months. We may never have an opportunity like this, but we're going to be home for a while. And what would you like to accomplish? Would you like to learn how to play piano? Would you like to get really good at shooting free throws? What would you like to accomplish? And then your job as a parent is to say, okay, let's figure out a plan to get you where you want to be.
I love how you describe it as an opportunity, because I know that is something we often overlook. It really is an opportunity for families to connect in ways that simply in the rush of Silicon Valley life, too many parents don't have.
Yeah, I think I've called my parents more this week than I've called them in the last month.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing either.
Yeah.
So how do you make learning part of the routine? We know that an awful lot of districts have jumped on top of blended learning and inverted classrooms and so forth, and have the kids doing homework and they're doing coursework. Not true in every district, unfortunately, right now, or in every school in our valley. So how do we integrate learning meaningfully?
So my understanding is that your team is going to put up on your website some of these things that we're going to talk about so that families don't have to write it all down right now.
Yeah, we will.
But there are so many great sites out there that kids can go online. You can take virtual tours of museums. You can go to the Winchester Mystery House or the Children's Discovery Museum or the Smithsonian Museums. You can go to museums all over the country and do virtual tours. You can do virtual tours of national parks right now. And then there's great learning sites. There's things like Khan Academy and Code Academy and Prodigy Math, PBS Kids. There's all kinds of great learning opportunities. And then there's opportunities for younger kids, things like Music Along, where kids can do young kids, less than 6, can do sing-alongs with other kids. You can learn for young kids story design and programming through a program called Purple Mash. There's all kinds of these things. And what's really special is all these ones listed either are free or during this shelter in place, they're offering their programs for free. So you can learn about all these things and find educational opportunities for your kids while they're at home. And can I tell you this? Can I tell you this too? There's an education in life skills as well. So teaching your teen to do laundry, that has real benefit, right? Teaching your child to wash a car, those things are things that they're going to have to learn to do at some point. We're going to teach you how to run the dishwasher. We're going to teach you, all these things that they need to do. How do you sew pants? Those things are all life skills. And I think there's time for parents to teach life skills while we're home too.
Well, I just want to say to our Facebook audience, if you can actually persuade your kids to wash the car after they've learned how to wash the car, please let me know so I can get my car over there right away. So
my kids will do it. My kids will do it for a small fee.
Yes. It's just the fee that varies.
Yeah.
So there are a whole host of resources, as you mentioned, and we're going to post those for those who are interested, everything from Code Academy, Coursera, Khan Academy, some great online tools for kids and people of all ages to learn. I've taken advantage of Khan Academy, which is fantastic. So we encourage folks to take advantage of National Geographic Kids and Scholastic Learn at Home. If you have access at home, there is a wealth of opportunity there. You know, I want to back up to something that I never really got to initially, but I really should have when I mentioned your book. The book is called Raising an Organized Child. Why is it important to have an organized child? Why is that important?
When I'm talking about organization, I'm not just talking about finding two socks that match. What I'm talking about is organized thinking, being able to show insight, to take perspective, to see the big picture, to solve problems, to make plans, to anticipate and estimate, these kind of higher thinking skills. And the point I'm trying to emphasize in the book is it starts when kids are infants. That there's these same 5 steps that you can take for infants that you use for toddlers and children and all the way through teen years. You just apply them differently. And those 5 steps are: 1, be consistent, like we talked about with limits and boundaries earlier. Introduce order so that everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You take out a toy, you play with the toy, you put away the toy. Give everything a place so that they understand that things develop spatially. They have a purpose spatially. And when we learn to process things spatially, we become more efficient, just like when we're sight word reading versus sounding out one letter at a time. Then we start talking about some of the higher order things like practice forward thinking, which means anticipating and estimating and planning. And then we promote problem solving. And so in the book, I talk about how you do that with little kids all the way up through kids as they reach their teen years and get ready to launch.
And what happens if you have family members who are friends who don't yet master organized thinking and they're in their late 40s already?
I don't know anybody like that. The reality is we've all got different organizational strengths and weaknesses, right?
Right.
Some people are spatially organized and other people are sequentially organized, and we play to our strengths.
Okay, very well. So going back to the subject matter at hand, of course, we've got a lot of cooped up families. Organization is important, but it's also important to blow off steam. You want to talk about what you view as the healthier ways to encourage good ways to blow out the steam.
Right. Everybody needs an outlet. And when kids are going to be home and cooped up, at some point they're gonna blow a little bit unless you let off steam throughout the day. And so I recommend things like, first, if you can find ways to get exercise. When you go outside, if you can go outside in a safe place, if you're fortunate to live in an area where you can go on walks and hikes and not be around other people, that's a great opportunity to get outside. Riding your bikes is great because it's very hard to come in contact with people when you're riding your bikes. Although, Sam, you came in contact with somebody riding your bike.
Yeah. Well, he was driving an SUV at the time. As
That's true. So there was some social distance.
Yeah, you need social distance.
But so any opportunity to go outside and exercise is great. But if you search YouTube, I mean, I go on my Twitter feed every day, and there's fathers and their sons doing exercises in their living room where the dad will do a push-up and the kid will crawl under them, and then dad will go down and the child will jump over them. And so there's all kinds of opportunities. You just have to make a game for it. In fact, today I saw a great video on YouTube with a dad who made 30 games for his child to play with using a roll of tape. That was all he used, but there were 30 different games that he invented. That kind of creativity and imagination sets good role modeling for your kids, but also exercise. So exercise is 1, creativity is number 2. If there's opportunities to be creative, some kids aren't athletes, but they love music or they love artwork. Let them explore those areas because for them, that's an outlet. All those opportunities, I think, are great for kids to blow off steam.
I think that dad who invented 30 games to play with a roll of tape is probably should be a pretty high price for rent, I imagine, for a lot of parents. Because we know that one thing parents have to deal with, particularly with young kids, is they get bored. So what's the strategy for combating boredom?
So first of all, when you have routines in place, kids are less likely to get bored, or they're less likely to complain about boredom. And the reason is this: when they have free time all day and they get bored, they feel like there's no end to it. And so it gets really scary. But if you have a schedule in place, then you can say, you know what, I'm bored right now, but lunchtime is in 30 minutes. Or, you know, we're going to be doing art in 40 minutes and I'll be good. So it reduces some of the anxiety. The second thing that I encourage parents to do in terms of boredom is don't be afraid of your child being bored. You don't have to solve that problem. In fact, when I talked about my book, I was talking about step 5, promoting problem solving. Well, solving the problem of boredom is a great exercise for kids to have. And so in every schedule, I think there should be free time so that kids have to just figure out what to do with their time.
Great point. So Amy Longinetti has written a pretty important question in, and let me read it for you. It says, you mentioned screen time for older adults and the importance of allowing flexibility for social reasons. What about young ones? I teach 2 to 3-year-olds, and I'm getting a lot of questions about whether it's an okay time to loosen the pediatric suggestions of really limited screen time.
So when she's talking about the pediatric suggestions, the American Academy of Pediatrics says there's really no need for a child less than 2 to be on screens. And for kids less than 5, they say very limited and only educational. And I think those are very good rules. I think there's some reality. If you're having to get work done and there's other things going on in your life, you have to think strategically about when I might use something like that. Don't just do it to say, here, have fun, because there's other things that they could do to have fun that are more creative and better for their brains. But if you just got to get dinner cooked and there's just no way I can watch this child right now, or you need to help your other child with their homeschooling, and there's nothing else that I can do to occupy them, a little bit here and there, you don't have to feel guilty about.
Well, in this world in which we do have so many devices that consume far too much of our time, we can be at home and with others without actually connecting with those others. And, you know, how is it that, you know, you really focus on meaningful connection within the family while you're all there trying not to pull your hair out?
So there's the connection with our immediate family, and that's important. And I think it's really great to schedule creative things to look forward to at home. I had a patient the other day who told me they had a Freaky Friday dinner, where at dinner on Friday, they all had to dress up like somebody else in the house. Just little events that they can do to make this thing. You could have a formal dinner if you wanted to. You could have pajama days, and you could have pizza parties and movie nights, but you know, things that the family can do together and they can look forward to. We mentioned earlier about having regular meals. This is an opportunity to eat all of your meals together. But you know, Sam, what I'm finding is that we're not only connecting with our own family, but all of our relatives. I mean, how many of those pictures of the Zoom conferences where all the family members are on at the same time? If you can do that with FaceTime or through Zoom or one of the other applications, it's a great opportunity for you to reconnect with your family, and also model for your kids that it's important to be connected to family during scary times.
Yeah, great point. And thank you, by the way, for mentioning a good San Jose company in Zoom. We have to give them props. Hey, so, you know, I understand, I occasionally hear friends of mine talking about their kids' confidence during this time, about how confidence gets shaken because of so much that's out there and that they're hearing. How can this crisis hurt children's confidence?
Well, you know, I think there's a couple COVID-specific suggestions, but let me just say that confidence comes from the ability to meet realistic expectations and the positive feedback that we as parents provide to our kids. And so when we've talked about expectations a few times today, and it's really important for you to think about what's realistic. Is it realistic for your 4-year-old to be quiet for 6 hours while you work all day? Probably not. And if you do that, your child's going to get a lot of negative feedback throughout the day, and that's going to be damaging to their confidence. So setting realistic expectations about what your child can do. Don't set the bar too low, because if you do, they live down to it. And don't set it too high, because if you do, they give up. But you have to gradually push your kids. But when we talk about that specific to COVID, one, we talk about the critiques that they may have because of their parents' expectations that aren't correct. The other thing I think about, or that comes to mind, is, a lot of kids are doing the online learning now, and that's great for many kids, but some kids don't learn that way, and so they may be having a learning struggle that they've never experienced before. And so it's really important to pay attention to your kids' emotions during these times. If they're acting out, if they're more irritable, if they're crying more, if their behavior is just different, that's usually a sign of stress. And you have to learn how to help your kids deal with stress.
You mentioned how kids learn differently, and some kids don't do as well with online learning. How is a parent to know if their child is just not as likely to be able to engage with one kind of online tool or another?
So uh, often that education to a parent um, comes from experience, meaning my child was doing fine and now my child's struggling. And so if you knew enough about what your child was doing beforehand, you ought to be able to recognize that there's a difference going on. Or if your child has conversations with adults at this level and he's organized and engaging with his peers and really seems to be struggling disproportionate to what you see as his overall abilities and intellect, that's a sign that something's not right. I think for a parent who is really educated about how kids develop, you can think about spatial reasoning and you can think about auditory comprehension and all these other neurodevelopmental factors that might make it possible for a parent to predict how their child might do. But let's leave that to the experts.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So certainly a lot of parents yearn for their children to be a bit more independent at this time when perhaps they may need to be on that conference call or deal with whatever the issue is of the minute. How are there tools out there that parents can use to really encourage and boost the independence of the child?
So I want to talk about gradual independence. You brought up working from home, and let's talk about gradual independence that we give to kids. So when we're talking about toddlers, it's really important for parents to have stations in their house. So this is the station where the balls are, and this is the station where we keep the stuffed animals, and this is where the puzzles are, and this is where your playpen is, and this is the place where we do tactile play that can get messy. And we have these stations all around the house, and you rotate your child from one station to the next. And you can ask them, which station do you want to go to? But really, you're keeping your child moving, and that allows them to not get bored with one activity and feel more confident moving to the next. As they get older, though, they're going to start saying, I want to do it myself. I want more independence. Mercer Mayer has this great series of books that I can do it all by myself. And that's because around age 4, they all start saying, no, I can do it. So that's where you start building in choices. You start giving them more options. Some parents would think, okay, more options means I'm going to put all their toys out for them and they can choose. Actually, options mean I'm going to put all their toys away and they have 2 or 3 out. And if they want something else, then they can work with you to put that away and choose something else, as opposed to jump from one toy to the next. As kids get older, we talked a little bit about lists that you can create within my learning opportunities and my cognitive activities and my exercise opportunities. And they have the opportunity to choose within that. And as they get older, teens, we start talking about goals and where do they want to head and what can I do to support them in their efforts.
You know, obviously not everyone has the opportunity to have all the training and education and experience you have. Are there online resources that parents can go to be able to help them at this time?
Well, so one organization that that is dear to me is Parents Helping Parents. Parents Helping Parents is an excellent resource for children that have, or families who have family members with special needs. I think this is particularly a tricky time because many kids are home who've had full-time aides, many kids who are home who need special learning support, and now they're home with their parents. And I think Parents Helping Parents has been a great, it's php.com, is a great, and I'm sure you're going to put that up on your website as well for families, but it's a great opportunity for families who have special needs to get support. If you're wondering how to talk to your kids, the American Academy of Pediatrics has great resources on their website that are excellent. I've been writing some articles that are out there on you can find them by typing in my name on Google, and you'll find my articles talking about parenting during a pandemic. And the other one is I've done recently is working parenting while sheltering in place.
I assume those were not written in advance. This is something
It was a quick turnaround. Yeah. Well, but actually a lot of this we're talking about is what I talk about in my book, because that organization and structure is so comforting for kids that if we can learn to continue it through this chaotic time, it really helps kids feel comfortable.
Yeah, and maybe a few adults as well. It's not a bad.
Sure. But with adults, it's really important for all of us to keep a gauge on our own emotional level and give ourselves the outlets and the breaks that we need as adults. I want parents to focus on the things that they can control, because there's some things that are out there that are out of their control, but there's a lot they can't control. They can control their exposures. They can control the cleanliness around them. They can control what their family's doing while they're home. There's a lot of things that are in their control, and if they focus on that, it keeps them more on the present as opposed to the what ifs.
Yeah, great point. So certainly this is a time of social separation, at least physical separation. But obviously an awful lot of parents want their children to appreciate the value of community. And how exactly do you create that sense of community at a time like this?
So for myself and my parents and my aunts and uncles and other people, we're doing these Zoom conferences or FaceTime calls so that we're connected to each other. But I think it gets trickier in some ways and easier in other ways with teenagers. Teenagers need that social interaction. I personally think that this crisis may be the hardest on teens. Their parents may be losing work and other things that are going on that we know are huge crises. But for a teenager who just found out they can't graduate or have a graduation or go to their prom, at that age, that's devastating. And it's really important for parents to sit and listen to just how their child's grieving or feels about it, or the anger that they have behind it, and not try to say it'll be okay and not try to pacify, but just listen and hear what they're saying, because I think this is a tricky time for teenagers. The other thing you can do when your teenager talks is just repeat what they said. Wow, it sounds like you're really disappointed that you're not going to have a prom. That's a bummer. And just hear them. Teens have, where it's easy is teens are better than any of us at being social over online. They all chat, they all communicate, they all know how to FaceTime, they all know how to engage. And that's really, really, really important for them to be able to continue that at this time. For the younger kids, where they're not as used to doing that, then we have to start thinking about finding them opportunities where they can engage. And again, I gave a list of social apps for children that your team can put up on their website. Because there's opportunities for kids, like I mentioned, Music Alone was a good example, where kids less than 6 do sing-alongs and different things. But there's also camps and exercise apps and different things that you can do in conjunction with other 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds that are safe and that are monitored. You can create music, you can take coding lessons with other kids, which I think is a valuable opportunity for kids to socialize.
And thank you for providing us those resources. We will be sure to post those as well. I really appreciate all this information you're giving to so many of our families. An awful lot of teens, of course, do have older parents and maybe grandparents, and they're increasingly aware about the risk to older people, particularly with this pandemic. How do you talk to children who are starting to get worried about how grandma's going to do?
So for little kids, I would keep it simple and just say, grandma is keeping herself clean and taking and sheltering in place just like we are. She's doing all those same things. And as long as we're all safe, things are going to be, things will likely be very safe and healthy for all of us. For older kids who are teenagers, it's really hard for them to take perspective, but they have these fears and worries. And what I would try to do with your teen is to say, hey, we're all on the same team with with this one. We are fighting this together, and we need you. We need the teenagers, because the teenagers are so social. It's so easy for you guys to spread this back and forth. We need you guys to keep everybody safe, so that we get them on board and invested in this, as opposed to just, oh my God, look what they're doing to me. They're not letting me see my friend.
And you mentioned earlier, of course, teenagers are actually, their skills are well tuned for distance engagement. The social media, TikTok usage is probably going through the roof right now. How do you as a parent think about how much they're using social media when literally there's nothing much for them to do otherwise to communicate with their friends?
So I think creating healthy limits is important. The American Academy of Pediatrics says that more than 2 hours of electronics per day is about a limit, and beyond 2 hours, there starts to be negative outcomes associated with kids' overall development and well-being. Now, during this time, because they're losing their social opportunities, I think being a little more lax than that is probably reasonable. But if kids are sitting there playing games for 12 hours, it's really like eating ice cream all day. It kind of turns you to mush. And yet a little bit of ice cream is great, and a little bit of gaming's fine. So letting kids know where there's boundaries. What I like to talk about with teens is there's need tos and want tos in life. And you have to do the need tos first. If you can do the need tos, we don't really get too concerned about the want tos as parents. But the need tos are, you got to take care of your health. You got to take care of your hygiene, which means you got to shower and you got to put on deodorant. You got to brush your teeth. Health means exercise and sleep and nutrition. You got to do your homework or your job if you have one. And if you do have a job like working at Safeway or one of the grocery stores, thank you, because we need you guys who are doing it.
Amen.
You got to do your homework, your household chores, and health, hygiene, homework, household chores, and be social. And those are really the need tos that a kid has to do. And if they're doing that, you've got a pretty good kid who's likely ready to launch as they get older. And if they're doing that, then you don't get too fussy about the want tos. But if they get up in the morning and they play games all day, which is a want to, and the need tos, there's dishes in the sink and the toilets aren't getting cleaned or whatever else your family needs, then something's out of proportion. If they're staying up real late playing games and they're not getting enough sleep, then something's out of proportion. And we need to reel that back in as parents.
We've talked a little bit about the fact that a lot of parents are working from home right now, and those are really parents who are blessed to be able to earn a paycheck right now. We'll talk in a moment about the fears that so many parents are grappling with right now that aren't earning paychecks. But for those who are working remotely from home, how do they set themselves up for success and still be good parents?
So toddlers, like I mentioned, we create stations. Infants, infants, infants are the easiest because you can strap them to your belly and you can walk around with them and you can get stuff done. As they start getting a little older, it's more tricky. But if you think about how 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds play, they don't really social play. They play in parallel. And so you can replace that. So your child sitting down doing a puzzle, you can sit down with your laptop and get work done. And the way you extend that puzzle play is every few minutes for a 2 and 3-year-old, you look over and go, oh, I love that. Or, wow, that's great. Just those little comments keep your child on task and keep them doing what they're doing. If you sit in the other room, they're going to come see what you're doing. And if you don't say anything, they're going to get bored in a couple minutes and they're going to start playing with your laptop. So you have to be realistic. And then when your child's getting bored because you're near them and you can sense it, you move them to the next station and you go over there and you work in parallel while they get things done. When kids get older, you can start talking about and putting them on the schedule. These are the times where I can't be interrupted. Unless the house is on fire or there's something horrible going on, I need to be on my conference call and you need to leave me alone during that time. But you've set your child up with schedules so that your child knows what's next and knows what to expect. And if they get bored, you have lists of things that they can turn to instead of coming to you for help and solving that problem. Teenagers are pretty easy. The biggest thing is getting them to spend time with you as opposed to spend time away with you.
Well, now they're stuck, so they have to, right?
Well, they have to, but they may lock themselves in their room all day, which, isn't the ideal. It's great if you're getting work done, but this is when breakfast is, this is when lunch is. Let's come on out. We'll see you then. We'll talk about how things are going.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, many of our neighbors are struggling right now because they're not able to earn a paycheck. And in addition to all the other fears associated with the pandemic, there's a lot of anxiety for a lot of parents right now about what the future holds, about whether they're going to be able to hold on through this time financially, and then obviously the fears for the safety of their children. Do you have any recommendations for parents who are just feeling a lot of anxiety right now and how they engage with their kids?
So there are all kinds of resources for people who are overly stressed out.
Yeah.
There are crisis lines if you need help, and you're feeling overwhelmed and depressed, whether it's, again, contacting parents, helping parents because your family situation is so difficult, or whether it's contacting the YMCA of Silicon Valley because there's domestic problems going on in your family. There's resources to support you and shelter you if you need that.
Doctor, let me point out too, we did have a Facebook Live discussion just a few days ago with Dr. Marianne Tyson. So I encourage our listeners to go back to check that out. She had some great suggestions. We talked about several of those online resources. So I'm sorry to hound you with the question as well. I just thought if you had any other additional insights, if not, I'm happy to move on to some of the other many areas where I know
I'm sure she talked about all the meditation apps and the mindfulness apps that are out there, and we got to take care of ourselves, and we got to exercise, and we got to sleep, and all those things are important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So certainly our friends and neighbors can't give us hugs, but they can help. How can they help?
Well, for people who can't leave their house because they're quarantined to their house because they're sick, people can deliver food. In my community, there's a whole list of people who are delivering food, going to the store, picking it up and delivering it. That's incredibly valuable. Checking in with each other and saying hello. Our community did a parade the other day where everybody went out on their driveway, and you could, if you didn't live in the neighborhood, you could just drive by and wave. So it was a way to stay in touch. My friends' community, they all did chalk drawings on their driveways so that when you went and took walks past everybody's driveway, you could see the chalk drawings that they did. So I think it is important to stay connected as a community and to look out for our older neighbors and to look out for our neighbors that we don't bump into as often, but just know that everybody needs someone right now.
Yeah, great point. And, I hope you don't mind if I use this as a shameless moment to give a plug to SiliconValleyStrong.org for those who want to give help. And also if you want to get help at this time, we know it's challenging for a lot of folks. You can certainly volunteer by going online at SiliconValleyStrong.org. We've had more than 1,700 volunteers sign up already, and they are delivering food to seniors and those who might be COVID positive, who can't come out of their homes. And it is so wonderful to see people, just this incredible outpouring of support. We are also raising dollars to help many families who are struggling right now. And we've been fortunate enough to raise more than $14 million in commitments. But of course, the need is so much greater. And so we'd love to have your support. Go online at SiliconValleyStrong.org. There's also a 211 connection there for those who need help and need resources in any way. We have a lot of information there and encourage folks to check it out. So thank you for allowing me that commercial interruption.
Sam, that's so important. And I'm so grateful you guys are doing that.
Yeah, well, we know a lot of folks are doing a lot right now, and we just love doing whatever we can to connect each other, all of us to each other. So are there some warning signs that parents should be watching for when they're at home? Are there things they should be looking at and thinking, well, you know what, maybe I need to take this to the next level and seek some more help for my kids or my family?
So I'm assuming you're talking more about stress level warning signs than just signs of being infected.
Right.
The signs of being infected are on every website. You can find that about fevers and sore throats and coughs and all those kind of things. But as far as signs of anxiety, it's changes in behavior. You have to watch your child's behavior. If they're more irritable, or if they're crying more, or if they're more teasy or more sassy, all those things are signs that they're just their system is off, and we have to listen to them and acknowledge that, and maybe give them a little more of our time when they're struggling. If your teen is totally isolating from your family despite everybody being home, that's a little concerning. It doesn't mean you have to get mad at them for doing that, but you go in and you find out, hey, what's going on? Is everything okay? Not just you're in your room and you lock yourself in there and you want nothing to do with us, because that's not going to open the conversation. But just, hey, I love spending time with you. What are you doing? And if they say, I'm just on my phone, hey, do you mind if I sit on the floor and just work on my phone, work on my computer while you're doing that? And just be present for your teen who's feeling stressed and overwhelmed. The more you're around them, the more likely they are to say something to you.
Well, Dr. Damon Korb, I love how you have devoted your life and your passion really to helping families be able to support children that are thriving and are ready to launch, as you put it. And I really thank you for the incredible work you've done in founding the clinics that you have and helping so many children over more than 20 years. Thank you for your incredible work, and thank you for sharing your insights and your wisdom with our community today. I just wanted to mention to everyone who's watching, we're going to continue to try to offer these resources to the community, some of the bright minds and inspired hearts like Dr. Damon Korb's. So please do stay tuned here to our Facebook channel and to our various networks on Twitter and elsewhere. It is important for everyone to know that social distancing does not mean social isolation. There are opportunities for all of us to come together as a community and help support one another. I really appreciate, Damon, your help in helping us understand how we can support our kids through this challenging time.
Yeah, thank you, Sam, and you and your family, Jessica. Stay safe and healthy, and we're all thinking about you.
Thank you, and the best to you and your incredible 5 kids and lovely wife.
Yeah. I'm less socially isolated with all my kids home than normal. we got 7 of us in this house right now.
But you still have your hair. That's the incredible thing.
You got to have goals.
Thank you for joining us, David.
Nice to see you again.